Welcome to Creators by Moonlight. Real conversations with content creators.
Led Bradshaw is a comic book creator from Brooklyn, New York. Together with his son Jake, he created The Adventures of Jake Jetpulse with the added goal of highlighting autism. In this interview, he talks about loving comics before they were cool, how autism awareness still has a long way to go, and how an unexpected interview reinvigorated his creative pursuits.
I grew up in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, New York. Growing up was a little awkward at first. In Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, during the late 70s and 80s, it was a predominantly white neighborhood, and being that I was one of the few black families in the neighborhood, it was a little awkward for me to adjust to fit in. That's when I really turned to comic books, cartoons, and drawing, to feel comfortable and express myself. Even amongst my friends and my classmates, I was pretty much like the quiet kid that just sat in the back of the classroom. And I would sit there and just draw anything that came to mind. It was something that really helped keep me calm, to break the nerves. Nervousness and anxiety was something that was constant, so I found myself drawing all the time. Aside from that, it was a pretty good childhood. And I guess that's where I found my identity with drawing, because it actually turned me from being the awkward kid into the popular kid in a way, because I was able to draw characters that and draw things for kids, and all of a sudden I became the kid that was completely unnoticed until oh wow, it's cool. Could you draw me a poster of Batman, or could you do me that could you draw me a Wolverine, or could you draw me this? And after a while, lunchtime became I had to eat really quick for 2 minutes, because I spent the rest of the lunch period pretty much drawing pictures for everyone. What turned out to be an awkward thing, growing up, actually helped me feel more accepted, because as I got older, as a teenager, even going from elementary to junior high school, it was more people knew of me, what I did. And it's yeah, that's the guy that drew this for me, and yeah, this guy that made the T-shirt for me, and I was that's pretty cool. So art really helped me out with my self-confidence and figuring out who I was. When I was in high school and I was reading comic books, I never stopped to think that it would become the big mega hit, thing that it is today. As a matter of fact, when I was collecting comic books, I remember the biggest controversy was the death of Robin and the death of Superman. It was around that time, and I remember oh my god, oh my god. I mean, we were just on I think it was Tim Burton's Batman that really changed everything. And I got to see this character in a completely different way, and I was wow, I really I love this movie. And then I started seeing all the other movies that were coming out. Still, even back then, I didn't think that it was going to be what it is now, like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. If you had told me that 20 years ago, or a little even more than that, when I was a teenager, that we'd be going to movies to watch, to watch these comic book characters, that would blow my mind. There was no doubt in my mind that I wanted to that I wanted to be an artist, or a comic book illustrator, or just to animate cartoons. This was actually something that I wanted to do ever since I was young. I remember maybe around the age of, I think it was maybe the first or second grade, and one of my teachers asked me what would you want to be when you grow up? And it's everybody had their idea. I want to be a doctor, I want to be a nurse. And it was really cool professions. But I was the one kid that was I want to draw Saturday morning cartoons. And that I stuck with that. That's never left me. So ever since I was young, I always wanted to draw comic books. My parents would buy me an extra notebook for school. I had my composition books for all my schoolwork, and then there was one book that I had just to scribble in. That was like my downtime book or whatever, like when I was at lunch or whatever when I wanted to draw. So I would always draw these, like I would make panels of either Spider-Man versus whoever I wanted. I didn't mind crossing over like brands like DC versus Marvel, because it was just something that in my head that I just felt like I wanted to do, just to see if I could do it. As time went on, it just never changed. Junior high came as a teenager. Like, I started trying out for like the different comic book companies and stuff, and you get your letter back and like, hey, we got your submittal. Thanks for sending it to us. But I never stopped. And then, like, of course, as you get older, life happens, and you're diverted off course at that time. And then there's other things that take greater precedence, like paying your rent, paying the bills, having a family, raising kids. Aside from having other jobs like that weren't in the field that I wanted to be in, I always in the back of my head always said to myself, I would like, what would have happened if if I tried a little bit harder? What would have happened if I just pushed myself a little bit more, And it was around the time that my son was born, I said to myself that I was going to try something different. I was going to dedicate my time to I wanted to change careers. I wanted to do something that, like, not only that he can be proud of when he gets older, but something I can be proud of, saying that, I did something for myself. So it was around the time that my son was born. That's when I decided that I was going to make some changes. I was going to actually take a career in art a lot more seriously. So I really put my efforts toward doing that.
As an adult, Led began teaching himself the business of art. But it was his son Jake who provided the spark to actually create a comic book.
2009, 2010, like right before he was born, I decided I was going to make some changes. And at the time, I was a stay-at-home dad when he was born. It just kind of helped even things out, with raising him, like with raising him at the time and stuff. The one thing that motivated me was I didn't have the time raising a child, like, to get into like an art school. So what I did was I knew a couple of friends who had graduated from a couple of the local art schools here in New York, and like I would like get the syllabus from them, and I would go to Barnes and Noble, like go to the bookstores, buy the books and stuff, and I would actually teach myself from the books, like how to do like the like graphic design type projects. I bought myself an entire like art table, and just refused to get up like until like I learned how to do all of this. And this was done all during the time like my son was taking naps in between feedings at night when everyone was asleep. So I would put in the hours to try and and learn as much as I could. When I went back to work, I met a really cool friend who's really like very incredibly talented designer and stuff, who actually took the time to teach me how to use like Adobe Illustrator and other like creative creative software. And he taught me enough to get a job working as like a technical writer and a technical illustrator. I went from being like a customer service representative at the time at the job that I had, like when I went back to work, to being the guy who actually laid out and wrote the user manuals for like Bluetooth speakers and like headphones and things like that, and be able like to draw them on the computer. And this made me feel closer to my goal. I wasn't quite where I wanted to be, but now I'm doing something art related, and that made me feel it made me feel great. It made me feel like I had accomplished something. I could at least say that I go to work and this is what I do. Maybe 2 years from that point, my contract was up from that job, and I think it was around the time that Jake was maybe about 3 years old, and it was around the time that he was diagnosed with autism. So he was about 3.5 years old, and he was in preschool at the time. I remember getting the diagnosis and not really quite knowing what autism was. To be honest with you, so many things in your head that flies through your head. It's when you start learning about what autism is, you start thinking about like, what kind of life is my son going to have? How are they going to treat him? Like what kind of person is he going to be? Your mind goes from one thought to the next, and then it goes to the extreme, and you start thinking about like, how are people going to perceive them, how are they going to treat them. Autism spectrum disorder is defined by deficits or challenges with social communication, and that can mean like making eye contact, or like holding the topic of a conversation. They may feel uncomfortable, in certain social situations. Like the three hallmarks are like adherence to routines, or if there's a break in routine, having trouble like coping with the change in the routine, or it could be social communication. So it's to classify it as a neurodevelopmental disorder, and it's like the autism spectrum disorder is basically it's classified as like a spectrum. There really is no preset like set of symptoms, but for example, like for Jake, we really didn't know that that autism was present until like around the age of 3.5, which I think is like the common age that like a lot of children like receive a diagnosis due to early intervention. So it's around 3.5, I guess. We didn't notice though, like before then. Looking back now, like I saw the signs that I didn't know. And one of the things I kept thinking about was like when I would call his name, he wouldn't immediately respond. Children sometimes will mimic a person's expressions, especially like if an adult is interacting with a child. If you smile at a child will will most likely smile back. Jake would not. So he would just stare at you. And we just thought it was just because like, okay, he's quietly judging, but that was something that we needed to pay attention to. And we noticed also too is that there was a delay in his speech. So at the time when other children like at his age were speaking more fluidly, Jake's vocabulary was only limited to just a few sentences or just a few words at like 3.5 years old. And like he would just express himself by like car, bridge, and that's pretty much all that would be said. And it's like it never occurred to me really that like usually children at the age of 3, they're usually rambling, like talking, but at that point we really didn't know what we were looking for. I didn't see it. So it wasn't until like the teachers were his preschool teacher had suggested it. And I know she was very careful with like making the suggestion, but I mean, I was kind of on her side too. Like, I'm like, okay, it's like I started to suspect something, so I was like, okay, I think I know what you mean. Like, let's try it out. And after a while, with getting in touch with some developmental pediatricians and having him evaluated that this may be autism spectrum disorder, that was the moment where we're like, okay, now it's time to figure out what's the best way to help him. After a while, I started reading, and then I came across something that was I never heard about this, but art therapy, and I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. What is this? you know. So as I started reading, I found out that it's like it's a great form of therapy for children with autism spectrum disorder, because the deficits in like communication and social skills. This is a way for them to visually create something without having to speak. And I remember how much it helped me when I was younger. When I was like the awkward kid, not really quite comfortable and stuff. I remember what it did for me. So I figured I would pick a couple of lessons and try them out with him. I know that he had some problems in school and stuff, and a lot of it was because he was self-directed, and his special interest was also about superheroes. So kind of the universe aligned in a way to where it's like I spent a good portion of my childhood and my teenage years drawing superheroes, wanting to draw comic books. And here I have a son whose special interest is superheroes, and that's all he wants to talk about. So I started, you know, sitting with him for 20 minutes a day and like teaching him how to draw, and like, okay, we're gonna draw different pictures. And then I started like mimicking some of the lessons and creating lessons plans of my own out of it. Like, okay, we're gonna talk about emotions and drawing your emotions and stuff. And I started breaking them down. Like, okay, well, we're going to make a chart, and the chart is going to be how do I feel today, and I'm going to say this color marker is yellow, and yellow is happy. Yellow is a happy color, and this one is red. Red is an angry color. and blue is a sad color. And I would tell him, when you're sad, use the blue one. When you're happy, use the yellow one. When you're mad, use the red one. So every day after school, this is what we would do. And I would put the chart on the refrigerator. I'm like, Jake, how do you feel today? He would take whichever marker and he would write it down. And then, in that way, I was like, okay, now I know how he feels and stuff. And I would talk to him. And then afterwards, we moved up a level. And it was like, okay, I want you to draw me a happy picture. Draw me a happy picture using this color. And it would be like red or like yellow or blue. So whatever it was, draw me a sad picture. It would be like the color with the color blue in it. And then I got to the big one, which was draw yourself as a superhero, and that was basically to show you like your self confidence and point out the things that you feel the most confident about yourself. And then he just took the ball and ran, drawing himself as a superhero. And then all of a sudden he had like these superhero allies, and he had his villains, and there was this entire comic book universe that was in his head. And I was like, Jake, so tell me more about your character. And he was like, yeah, so my character, he shoots real like rays out of his eyes, and he flies faster than the speed of light, and he has his friends, and his friends help him do this. And I thought it was magnificent. So it was so good at one point. I had to put the voice recorder on my phone. I had to turn the thing on. And I was like, go ahead, keep talking, keep telling me more about it. And he would just tell me everything there was, and which planet characters came from, and like why they're fighting. And I'm like, wow, this story is something I've never heard of before. And it was so fantastic that this entire universe existed in his head. So I wanted to fine tune it a little. I remember for like a few months I would sit there and ask him questions about like who were the villains, who or whatever, but like we really didn't have any idea what they looked like, but he would just tell me who they were. And then like one night he had this really bad like nightmare, this really awful nightmare. And I remember the next day he was still stirred from that nightmare, and I told him like, Jake, you want to sit down and draw it with me? And he started drawing the characters he saw, or the monster or whatever it is that he saw in his head, and he would draw it for me. And then I tell him, let's give it a silly name, and like we would give it a silly name, and we would make jokes and laugh at it. And then something said to me in the back of my head. I was like, you know what? Why don't you turn these into the villains? Let's make a comic book and turn this nightmare into one of the villains. I was like, huh, that's a good idea, you know? So I was like, yeah, draw me more of this stuff. So every time he had like a bad dream or something, like I would tell him to draw it, and then we'd, put it all together. I remember I was walking him to school one morning, and he saw somebody like I think they were like cleaning in the park and stuff, and they were cleaning up some of the garbage in the park, and there was a guy who happened to be standing like underneath like an overpass. And Jake says to me, he's like, Dad, is that an ogre? And I'm like, no, that's not an ogre, that's a man cleaning in the park. And he goes, but ogres and trolls live under a bridge, right? And I'm like, oh man, I'm like, he is right, I was like, no, that's a man in a vest, and he's cleaning up. And he's like, oh, okay. And he stayed with that for days. So he started drawing this character, and he was like, yeah, this is Mars the troll. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. He's like, yeah, Mars lives under a bridge, and he's like, and he's mean or whatever, and blah, blah, blah. And he had this whole story about this big mean troll that lived under a bridge. And it was like, oh, that's kind of cool. So for like the first like few drawings that we had of like the character in our book, Mars the troll, he was this mean old troll that lived under a bridge. And then Jake had a change of heart and said, you know what, I don't want him to be mean. I like Mars, let's make him a hero. And I was like, okay, that sounds better. We'll do whatever you want to do. And we just started putting this whole thing together. And keep in mind, this wasn't like we had any kind of comic books in mind. We were just doing it on like regular typing paper and then stapling it together, like his drawings and my drawings together. And I would just make a big stapled, stack of paper with like drawings on it. And those would be his comic books. So yeah, that's really how like it all started to happen. It wasn't until like maybe he was in the second grade, like as time had passed from that point, where the teachers are just really concerned about like him grasping the information, that I decided to take all of that work that we were doing together and actually turn it into like a book. And, to help him learn how to read, to identify certain words. And I was only doing it to help him. That was pretty much my main intention. And, like, I wasn't thinking about like making a comic book. I was just thinking of ways to help Jake learn how to read. And that's really what was my original goal, until all the kids started to like it in the class. And then they kind of encouraged me to make more. But yeah, my original intention, it was like, at first I thought of it as like a beautiful accident, but it really wasn't an accident at all. It was just something that, like, it was just me fulfilling my purpose, I believe. I never even knew it was coming.
Inspired by the ideas they developed, Led decided to expand them into a full-fledged comic book universe, with the added goal of highlighting the issues that surround autism.
Learning about like autism spectrum disorder and people who are on the autism spectrum, like, I was really surprised. Because when I looked at it, it was like there was such a misrepresentation in it when it came to like autism spectrum disorder, or like the myths behind it. And some of the things that I was coming across were like, for instance, like Dustin Hoffman's performance in Rain Man. I mean, great performance, but a lot of people believed, I guess, the stereotyped autism spectrum disorder as this kind of like autonomous robotic like behavior, which it's not. There's a lot of misconceptions that, like, that the people on the autism spectrum don't have feelings. And these were some of the things as I was learning, as I was reading. I needed to do something that shows autism spectrum disorder in a completely different light. And it's like, to paint a completely different picture. And I was like, okay, it's like this is nothing like my son. This is nothing like Jake. This is nothing like the other children that I know that are on the spectrum. Like, no, and that was the other like fuel, in the engine to build to build this comic book, to really create a character that like really embodies who Jake is and who these children really are. The Jake Jetpulse universe, or the Jetpulse universe as Jake calls it, is a world completely much like our own, and it takes place in his hometown of Brooklyn, New York. So Jake is a very unique child because in the Jetpulse universe he has these magical powers which were infused by alien technology. He has two other friends who who know his secret and who work with him and help him save the world, which is Julia, who is also on the autism spectrum, and she's like the uber genius, the tech geek. She loves to build fighting robots and likes to create things with the junk in her uncle's garage. So she's the tech geek and know-it-all, and it's one of the cool things that was added into her character is that she's also exceptionally skilled with Taekwondo, because her family wanted her to make friends, so they put her in karate school, and she just learned to be really good at it because she was always there. And then we have Mars the Troll, who is an 8-foot troll who is an alien from a planet Mastro. So the trolls are at war with the evil goblins, and they're ruled by a goblin hive queen, who basically is conspiring to find the most powerful weapons in the galaxy and take everything over. So Jake and his friends, band together to stop her with help of other young superhero kids, to form this grand superhero team. So we just recently introduced two new characters. One character named Miranda, who's a red-haired telepath, and her partner, who is the Shrive, who is he's a cross between Batman, Michael Myers, and the creepy ghost stories, because he's nonverbal. And we wanted to create a character for nonverbal autistic children and yet have them really, really cool. So he's got the whole the cool dark Batman vibe about him, but only Miranda can hear his thoughts and understand what he's saying because she can read his mind. So the five of them are trusted, to protect the universe against, the goblins and the Goblin High Queen. So it makes a really cool story, and it's a lot of fun to tell. Creating the Jetpulse universe has become my full-time job. It's become something that immense now, to where this is pretty much what I'm doing in between like sleeping and getting him ready for school. So now it's actually like my days are completely full of like concept art, and it's taught me a lot. It's actually, it's taught me a lot as an individual, as like a person who's like a business owner doing this full time. It's taught me a lot about like social media and advertising. It's taught me a lot about like the concept, like the process of like building storylines, the concept art, like developing characters. There's so many things that I do now that like really this occupies my day. It's actually kind of cool, and I don't realize that, like, how wild my day is until I'm talking to one of my peers. I'm talking to one of my friends, and they're talking to me about like their day at the office, and I'm telling them about mine. It's like, you know, and I wouldn't trade this for the world. It's actually really awesome because now I feel like I'm actually doing what I was meant to do. So, that kid back at the second grade that was asked, I want to draw Saturday morning cartoons, I want to draw comic books. And I remember the chuckle that I received when I said that. It's actually kind of funny now that I'm doing this every day. We're going to keep expanding the Jetpulse universe, and we have a lot of plans for it. The Jetpulse universe is a little common like to Marvel's universe in a way, to where it's the Adventures of Jake Jetpulse is just one story out of many along like a timeline. So the other characters will be introduced and will go on into their own stories, and those stories will be told all within this kind of interconnected universe that the characters will bring. There's different characters like meaner, bigger villains that are in store, and it's just it's a really cool story to tell. They're really amazing because it's like the story that we're putting together is from Jake's imagination. It is coming from his mind, and I'm just drawing it. So it's so much fun because I'm really like we work together, and it's like the more I learn about the universe that he sees, it's like the more I can use like my experience as like an adult to teach him about certain values. So we're not only building an entertaining like adventure story, we're also like a way of like teaching children about like everything from sharing to friendship, social issues, things of that nature. So there's so much that'll be added into it. I started kind of backwards because in the beginning I started making the activity books and like the beginners readers because it means to help Jake and his friends. And now we're getting around to telling the story, the world building, so it's like, so we kind of went in reverse with that, but we do love doing the activity books. So now we're finally getting around to like introducing children to the characters and their personalities and who they are, and like the world that they live in. So it's a load of fun.
Led still had to grapple with the business side of creating a comic book, and he faced numerous setbacks. However, an out-of-the-blue interview with the Today Show helped to reinvigorate his momentum.
To get into the industry, from what I've heard, it's pretty difficult. It's like I hear that it's very competitive, and I think that's how I kind of circumvented everything by doing it independently. Like I kind of just paved my own way, and there was a few things that I wanted to do to set myself apart from everyone else. I promised myself that I did not want to make the next Batman or try to just, like I didn't want to reinvent the wheel. I didn't want to do anything that someone else has done or like draw it in a way that everyone like that is very popular. Because one thing about like comic books and illustration is that there are people that are really good at drawing like someone else, you know, and it's like it's something that I wanted to deviate from. And I thought to myself too that because of like superhero movies, like are a lot of people reading comic books these days. So I said to myself, it's like, what age did I start reading comics? And I thought to myself, like, okay, cool. I was about 6 or 7 years old. I was around my son's age. When he started, that's why, like I said, you know what? I'm just gonna do like the workbooks, and I'm gonna do like the beginners readers, and I'm gonna introduce this character as like a means of like a workbook and an educational tool. And then I'll build into the story around him. But like I felt that was an easier way to get kids to enjoy this character, and have this character grow up with them. So now that I've developed like some kind of life to it as a tool to help kids like learn, like learn and discover and things like that, and create their own superheroes and stuff. Now I can show them what kind of a hero he is, and go that way. Like that's pretty much how I did it. And especially for like somebody who really isn't into like the whole legal thing, that was something I had to learn about, like creating an independent property, and like making sure I'm not signing this thing away to somebody else, and things like that. So it's like I was very cautious about the people that I showed it to. I really had to sit down with somebody who was very like knowledgeable of like trademark laws and copyrights and things like that. I wanted to retain the rights to this so it wouldn't get away from us. And that's when, like, I said to myself, like, okay, now that I've got all of this together, I can go and pitch it. So around like 2019 or 2018 or somewhere around the way, like a production company like approached me and stuff, like, we want to turn this into a cartoon. And that was awesome. Like, we thought it was a great idea. But then COVID hit, and then that also played with like trouble with like getting investors, because of course, like, COVID pretty much shut everything down. So that was something that had to go on the back burner. And unfortunately, because of that, it was a lot of other issues that also caused the delay of that. And I had to be aware of like production companies like promising, like, yeah, we want to turn this into a cartoon. They have like these high hopes and everything, but they don't have like the money to actually get it done. There were so many things in the back of my mind. It's such a competitive business when you look both ways. It's like when you look at it from like the comic book perspective, from like a cartoon. There were so many things where it's like, as one person, it's like it's a lot. It's very competitive. I felt like the best place for me to be is just to continue doing it the way that I'm doing for now, and then like now I'm at the point where I can honestly, like, I've learned a lot, made a lot of mistakes. I've placed my faith in like situations that didn't pan out, and these are just learning experiences. It's a very tough industry to get it in front of. It's like also too, it's like I've learned that people are very used to what they already know. And you see it on television, you see it in movies where it's like there are reboots, reimaging, and like reimaginings of like things we once used to watch and enjoy as kids, so it's like to bring something brand new to the table that nobody has ever seen before. It's like I want to present to the world the first Afro Latino superhero on the autism spectrum. I mean, seriously, that's what he is, and it's like it's amazing that that's what he is, and it's like it's a risk for some production companies because no one's ever experienced that before, you know but it's safer to go with like a reboot of Ultron. It's safer to go with another Star Wars series, or or a Marvel property, because people already know it. So it's tough to really get this in front of people and show them, like, show the world, like, this is something that you guys would love. And I feel like with persistence, because that's something, thankfully, like, over the last few years I've been able to do with like previous interviews and stuff. And like, Jake and I have been completely determined to continue the series for as long as we can, and as long as we feel like we have to, until this thing becomes something, or more than it already is. Our Today Show interview happened, it just came out of the clear blue sky. To tell you the truth, I didn't contact them. As a matter of fact, I believe it was one of their producers that were looking for like unique, unique stories. And our segment ran during Autism Awareness Month, which was absolutely amazing. At that time, like, Jetpulse was pretty much like, I was afraid that it was like taking a dive into the water. And it's like, like the year before that, that was when I had that fallout with one of the production company who wanted to turn it into like an animated cartoon. and I was really struggling to try to like bring it back to like to get it back to like doing the workbooks, because like focusing on like turning it into like an animated cartoon like is a tremendous feat. So me being the only artist and only writer, I wasn't producing any books during the time. So I had to really get back to like creating like like new content, and dedicate all that time to really showing that we were still out there. So when the Today Show hit, and like the when they called and like, hey, we want to do like a segment about you, I thought it was a joke at first. I really did. I thought it was a joke. I was like, are you guys serious? Me? Really? I'm like, but it turned out to be one of the coolest things ever. This is something that I've always said from the beginning. I'm like, one of these days, man, this is going to turn into something big. I want to see this turn into something big. And that was like that was so cool, because the moment that segment ran, I remember it was only maybe 6 minutes, perhaps, or maybe a little less. Everybody, my family's watching it, and it's like I can see like like the tears in my mom's eyes. I'm like sitting there, and I'm like, everything was just so surreal, and Jake is jumping for joy. He's like, I'm on television, I'm on television. I was just completely floored. And then all of a sudden the website notifications started coming in, like people visiting the website, and it was just nonstop. And it was like from all over, from Germany to New Delhi, from Hong Kong, Brazil, from all over the place, like from like Italy. And I was like just sitting there, just awestruck, like, oh my god, like I can't believe this. It's like I couldn't even get 10 people to look at my website like a few months before, and it's like all of a sudden now it's like. And then I started seeing like the order forms for merchandise, and I'm like, people are actually buying the t-shirts. I'm like, oh my god. So if anybody has a Jake Jetpulse t-shirt out there or a hoodie, thank you. But it was one of the coolest things, and it was completely unexpected to be a part of that. And we're very fortunate to be a part of that, and thankful for them for even thinking of us, like considering us to being a part of it. We weren't on like TV like every week thereafter. Like we didn't become like a household name after that. It was temporary. It did last a while, but it gave me enough momentum to have some kind of relevance. The thing was that we were able to do like other radio shows, and and podcasts, and spread our message out there. And it's like that one TV spot, we said, okay, that's just the warm up. That's one out of like many to come. So like let's just prepare ourselves for when it happens again. And let's just use this as like a social media, like the way to get ourselves relevant in social media. And like so like for Instagram and Facebook, and the other platforms, let's try our best to keep this going. And it helped out, because it helped us get in touch with other schools, like with other teachers, like using our books in the classrooms. And that's really like where we started. So we kind of kept that going too, like, hey, have you heard about us? This is what we're doing. And so far it's been great. It's been a great experience. Like we're looking forward to that moment when we become the household name. We're looking forward to it. We're like the both of us are like, Jake and I are very confident that it's just a matter of time before it does. And we're looking forward to it. And it's like and we'll be prepared for it when it comes. So that's how we look at it. It's all positive from here. And it's like, and it gives us time to prepare for like Autism Awareness Month. We've contacted other like autism organizations to let them know that we exist. Another cool thing too is that I needed to work on keeping those technical writer muscles like still healthy and stuff. So a few years back I did a product review for for like a wearable GPS unit for like for kids. And they just recently contacted me saying, hey, we really loved the video you guys did, and the guys did on one of our products and stuff. Would you like to do another one? We'll send another unit out to you. And it's like okay, cool, because we always wanted to do like a YouTube channel. And we've been working on that as another means to like the Today Show helped us out in many ways, because now it's like in the months since then, we've been planning on doing like a full-fledged YouTube video of like product reviews and unboxing, art and craft, like sensory therapy videos and everything for kids, on the autism spectrum, for parents too. Like, like cool do it yourself arts and craft things you can do at home. So, like, Jake and I are developing that. So we're looking to have that running this summer, or like the spring or summer of this year.
On the Jake Jetpulse website, Led included a section with additional support for those dealing with autism. He believes this disorder should not hold anyone back from achieving their goals.
The basis of our website was to create a place where parents and other individuals can go and learn about autism spectrum disorder. I, along with like Jake's speech, occupational, and physical therapist, we got together and put together an autism database, and we put all the information of what the different types of autism spectrum disorder, along with understanding the symptoms, and like which red flags should you look for, like other information on like early intervention, like when is a good time to start, to start seeking help for your child if you're the parent of a newly diagnosed child. This was all done to alleviate some of the concerns, the confusion, the worry, like of a parent with a child who's been newly diagnosed. I remember my feelings when I was told that, that Jake was, on the autism spectrum, and how like I rushed to the internet to find as much information as I possibly could. I wanted to create like a resource, and that's what the website, like, that's how it began, as a resource to like for other parents and other individuals to come and learn about what autism is. And I didn't stop there. It not only talks about autism, but it also mentions like sensory processing disorders. It also mentions other things. I wanted to build on it and talk about like other things as well. But the forum I built because I wanted to bring people together as a community. And that's what I felt like, like there's something that Jake Jetpulse could do, is like bring people together as a community, as a means to like come and talk about their concerns, their kids' milestones, things that happen to them, good or bad. They can come and and speak to some other people. They don't have to feel like they're alone when they're stressed out. Whether it's with a physical or a neurodevelopmental like disability. I don't like using the word disability really, but it's like sometimes raising a child who, like raising children alone can be a daunting task, and every now and then you need a break. You're just like, sometimes you feel bad for some of the things that you're thinking, like, I really need a break, I really need to get away from this, why is this happening to me? So I wanted to create like a forum for where other people can connect and talk to each other, find out information. And there's things that we all don't know, so it's good to connect with somebody who's been through something, and it's like I thought that would be a great way to help other people support each other. So I invite people to come and like check out the forum and start up a conversation, and really like wanted to build on that. So this is something that I'm really going to be focusing on to bring more attention to the website. One of my great friends, Lisa Capiello, she's a phenomenal friend, a longtime friend of mine. She's also she's also a teacher, she's an author, but she's also, I would say, like a meditation instructor. And a lot of the videos that she's been so cool to donate to to the site, like breathing exercises, not only for the parents but for the children too. And that's also been a pretty like a pretty cool addition to the website. So there's a lot more than just the comic book adventures of Jake Jetpulse. There's other like helpful resources, like for parents, to really find like useful information to give them some help. Do I feel like Jake's gonna follow my footsteps? Probably. I feel like right now, like he's really into it, but this is something I don't force on him. I want him to find his own path. Sometimes he wants to, learn about boxing, and he wants to play baseball, and it's like, and I encourage him. I know that he has fun creating comic book characters, and the cool part is that like I include him into the process so that he sees that there's more than just drawing. So there's the creative writing end of it when it comes to making a script. So I found different classes on online of how to build a script. He's really interested in concept art and how does that work, and storyboards. So even if he doesn't want to create comic books, he still wants to be a part of something creative in some way. Whether it's costumes because he wants to learn how to make costumes, or just recently he's been asking me questions about how do they do special effects in movies. So if this is something like a step in a staircase to a higher level where he wants to go and to do something, yeah, then I completely I encourage it. So I try to teach him as much as I can about everything that I do, and hopefully that will give him what he needs to move further. And as long as it gives him the confidence to really go for whatever he wants, he has my blessing. I mean, if he wants to continue this, that would be great. I would love it. If I could give a person any kind of advice if they wanted to get into just comic books, is never be afraid of the word no. There are going to be hundreds of no's. There are going to be a lot of people who might think your work is silly. They're going to think that there's nothing original about this story. They're not going to think that your character is any good. But as long as you believe you believe in yourself, you believe in what you do, there should be nothing that stops you. We're at a point in technology and time right now where we can pretty much produce a lot of great content at home. My thing is that to give it a try. There are some people out there who may be afraid to share, to share their creation with the world. And I love to speak with people who aren't quite comfortable yet, showing their work, giving them different methods to do it. But there never is a perfect time to get your work out there. Sometimes it takes just putting it out there. Of just don't be afraid of what other people say or think. Don't worry about that. The courage, the determination, it all comes from you, and don't let anyone tell you differently. There's so many things the moment you put it out there, it's you could always build and improve on it. And there's so many people who are not as brave as you, who are going to try and talk you out of it. But just go for it, because you never know what's going to be out there until you do. Don't let anyone try to define you by your autism. Don't let anyone try to to define you. Surprise them, shock them. I told this to Jake all the time. You can do anything that you put your mind to it. There's nothing that you cannot do. And it's don't let people define you by your shortcomings. Treat it as a superpower instead. I see in my son, if you were to ask him who his favorite superhero is, he says it's him. And it's I always believe that everyone inside all of us has a superhero just waiting to get out. That's the thing that always gets me. It's oh, but this person has autism, so so what? I knew someone who didn't have their right hand, who could ride a bicycle better than I could. It's don't let people define you. You define the kind of life that you're going to have. Don't let anyone stop you. Constantly move forward, and don't ever be discouraged by anyone's negative words. They're just words. Just continue doing it. As long as you believe in what it is that you're doing, keep doing it. The website, there's www.jakejetpulse.com, and feel free to look me up on social media at Jetpulse Comics.
Thanks for listening to Creators by Moonlight. Email the show at creatorsbymoonlight@gmail.com and follow the show on social at Creators by Moonlight.